Hello and welcome to Talk the Line, the new podcast from the line of Best Fit. I live for a pun. Start with a name and work your way back. We are the UK's biggest independent website for new music discovery, and I am Jen Long. I used to be a presenter on Radio 1, and now here I am, just working for the chance to get to meet the musicians I love. No, every week or so I'm talking to an artist about something that they are passionate about, usually something that not even their PR knows that they are obsessed with. It's like a secret insight into the world of indie's finest. And this week I'm talking to Árni Árnason from the Vaccines, all about something that happened in Iceland in the 1940s. Icelandic-born Árni Árnason has played bass with the Vaccines since they formed 7 years ago. Growing up in Iceland, his early love of music was kick-started when his dad gave him a tape of the Pixies' Surfer Rosa before he developed a love for hardcore and punk. After a dalliance with programming beats for an Icelandic rapper, Árni bought his first bass guitar from a friend with his pocket money. Árni moved to London a decade ago and studied at the Institute of Contemporary Music Performance before forming the Vaccines with his friends. The band placed third in 2011's BBC Sound Of poll, and they became the first artists ever to perform live on Later with Jules Holland before even releasing a single. He's retained his Icelandic identity within the band, even performing songs by the punk bands he loved as a teenager during their sets. And he's also had articles about Icelandic culture and music published in his home country. Now hard at work on the Vaccines' fourth album, Árni's also making his own music, which he says has come from spending endless days in his East London studio. He played his first live shows this past winter and describes his solo music as woozy sci-fi popicana and depresso tropicana. He says, everything I write sounds like a soundtrack to an early morning space-age pool party. We are sat in his East London flat talking about something that happened in Iceland in the 1940s, known as the situation. So I guess we should start by talking a bit about you.
Okay.
And about your sort of background and how long you lived in Iceland and your connections still to Iceland, just to get kind of, I guess, a sense of how you discovered this story and your knowledge of it and where it comes from. So, I mean, what was it like there? Because, I mean, I feel like nowadays Iceland, it doesn't seem like a distant spectacle. No. Like now Iceland's just like, okay, cool. It's that like place that tons of people go for, almost like for city breaks even.
Yeah.
Almost like you would go to Copenhagen or you would go to Amsterdam. Like, I don't think it's a particularly long flight. People, no, it's 2 hours? Three. Yeah. And people seem to go there for like a weekend or a short trip, and they go to the Blue Lagoon and they go and look at some waterfalls and they eat some fish, and that's Iceland it feels quite a normal destination.
Now it does,
Now it does. I feel like when I was growing up, Iceland felt like this other world.
Yeah. I think it's just simply got to do with like the economy. Basically, like when everything crashed in 2008, was it? Then just like the prices of flights were all of a sudden cheap, and like your £10 beer all of a sudden cost £6, and
Right.
So I think like, and there's also just like really clever marketing of a couple of like airlines or something. But now like you can get a flight from any London airport like 3 times a day or whatever. Like that didn't used to be the case. Like when I moved here, you never really went back because it's like a £350 ticket or something.
Right.
But like now, like you can get them for like £100 or whatever. But I think that's going to change again. I think all tourist destinations like are like in vogue for a bit, And Icelanders have proven to be a country happy to throw all of their eggs in one basket and just sort of rely on a single source of income for basically anything. And we've seen that fail a couple of times before, and it will fail again.
So what was it like growing up there, and how did you see Reykjavik change over your 23 years?
Not massively, in all honesty. Okay. I always grew up I was always in the suburbs. So like, apart from like a couple of years where I lived in town, but it didn't really change dramatically whilst I was there. It started changing very dramatically after I moved.
Okay.
So yeah, like the first time I ever went back over a summer holiday was like probably after having been here for like 5 years, and it was unrecognizable. Like the whole place just, it's unbelievable.
How so was it in terms of the people who were there, or the buildings, like the infrastructure?
Yeah, no, it's just because of like rather than relying entirely on finance as a source of income for the state, they were relying entirely on tourism. So like all of the area which is like now which is now sort of touristy, there was nothing there. Like there was like all of that harbour bit, there was nothing there. So that opera house wasn't there.
What were they relying on before, did you say?
I guess like well, obviously our banks like bankrupted us.
Right.
So I think like we had more money in like sort of risky finance than like any country in the world, and or I don't know that for a fact, but you know we were pretty extravagant. But prior to that, it was mostly like fish, and prior to that, it was basically the arrival of the army. You know.
Right, of course, yeah, which we will get onto, but
we will get onto that.
I just think it's nice to just when like for myself, having only really known Iceland from a tourist perspective. I think
have you ever been to? Have you just been for the festival? Or
no, I went on a school trip, which was very strange. When I was in like year.
Or like a geology class or whatever.
First year of A levels, I think, for geography.
Yeah, geography.
And we had like a really nice geography class, and everyone got on and was friends, and teachers were just kind of cool.
Yeah.
And they were just like, we were studying like volcanoes or something like that. And they were just like, well, if we organise a trip to Iceland, hands up who would want to go. And it just seemed like,
just crazy.
Some of my friends were like, we're going to go to Spain for our holidays. And I was like, I really don't want to go and like get pissed on shit vodka in Spain. And that's, to me, just going to Iceland just seemed like this just amazing like life journey, you know, like the sort of thing that you'll still talk about in like 30 years time. Mm-hmm. And I just really wanted to go, and I like begged my parents, and my mom was like, okay, you need to choose now. You can either like get like a car for your 17th birthday, like an old banger, or it was my parents. I really wasn't spoiled or anything. They were like, or we'll pay for you to go to Iceland. And I was like, Iceland. So I mean, I didn't learn to drive until I was about 21, 22 because I went to Iceland.
Wow.
But it was a really strange trip. The teachers gave us a lot of freedom to just do as we pleased, and we did the Blue Lagoon, and we went on like hikes into different valleys. Like it was one called the Thorsmuck Valley, maybe? Yeah.
So you went there?
Yeah.
That would have been really off the map for that time, yeah.
I mean, we were like walking through ice streams, and our shoes were like full of ice water, and we were climbing up rocks that were really quite dangerous. And we went over to the Westman Isles.
Yeah.
In like light aircraft, in like light.
Oh, you flew in?
Yeah, we
wow.
flew in. And then they took us on oh my God, this is one of those things, right? It's just, I'm such an idiot, but I always have to prove myself. I always have to like show off. And we got this tour, and then they told us about this sport that they do there called rope swinging.
Okay, yeah, in the Isles.
Yeah. And so there's this rope hanging from the cliff face, and they're like, oh, you just climb up to that ledge, and you take the rope, and you just swing out and bounce off the opposite cliff. And so all the like bigger boys in the group, they climb the rock and they back and forth off the cliff. And then I was like, well, I'm not going to be outdone by a bunch of boys. No. I'm going to give it a go. And it was just such a mistake. And I got up there and I was fucking terrified because it was quite high. And I just went to jump out, and I just didn't have that much upper body strength anyway. And I swung out, and I didn't swing out far enough, and the rope started spinning, and I just let go because I was just like, fuck, just let go. I just fell straight on my bum. And for about 20 seconds, I couldn't feel my legs. Wow. And it was that thing where I fell off and everyone in the class burst out laughing. And then everyone went silent when they realised I'd fucking hurt myself. And so then it's like, I can't get up, and my hands are starting to freeze because it's so cold. And eventually, like, I get up, the teachers helped me get on the bus, and then they had to take me to a casualty there. who were just like, "You've bruised your coccyx. You're going to be fine.
You're going to be fine."
Because I think on impact, like around your spine just swells to stop any damage, and so I was fine. But oh my God, for about 6 months after coming back from Iceland, I had to sleep on my bedroom floor and take ibuprofen.
Oh my God. That sounds like a nightmare.
Such a dip.
It's a pretty dangerous fall as well, I can imagine.
Yeah. I mean, it was. They really did give us kind of gave us enough rope to hang ourselves on that school trip. Quite literally.
Yeah.
But no, so when I went to Iceland, that would have been about 2001, 2002.
Yeah.
And it wasn't particularly tour. I think there was a Top Shop there. So sort of all that was recognisable to me, really.
Yeah.
And then I went back for Airwaves, maybe 2011.
Yeah.
And it felt really different.
Yeah.
But I guess I didn't really think about it because because it'd been such a long time since I'd been there, and I was quite young and I wasn't paying a lot of attention, and we didn't spend that much time in the city centre either. I think we just went in for like one day.
Yeah.
Like went to a swimming pool and then
around.
had a little walk around. Yeah. But it did feel a lot more maybe metropolitan than I'd expected.
Yeah, it does. It's got like this sort of I think for people that go there for the first time do find it surprising how metropolitan it is. But it's like it feels very surface level to me.
Right.
Because there's no history for it. Like I think the oldest restaurant in the city. It's like certainly one of the oldest restaurants in. Like there's a famous one, an Italian restaurant next to. Do you know where that hot dog stand is?
No, I don't.
Okay. Anyway, there's like a sort of a famous hot dog stand, and then next to it there's a restaurant called Ástandið, and I think that is so old that it's got the age of it plastered on the building. It says 1979. Serious,
right. Okay. Yeah.
I grew up in a house, and I lived briefly in a house in town that was so old. It was, and again had the age of it, and it said 1921. So it's a pretty sort of recent transition into being just a city in general.
And I suppose another thing is the music that comes out of Iceland. That everyone always thinks of Iceland for Björk. Mm-hmm. Is she not Iceland's biggest export? Or something crazy like that?
I've got no idea, actually. I doubt that very, very much. But she would have to be worth, like 15 U2s to be like Iceland's biggest export.
Right. Okay.
I don't really know that, but I would be very surprised.
Sorry,
but I like anecdotes. Anecdotes are always fun.
I should have said Björk.
Yeah, Björk.
I always get in trouble for that. Yeah. And Sigur Rós, of course.
Yeah.
God, you've got loads. I'm blanking, but there's definitely a lot of other.
There's a lot of music out there. There's like.
It's that chap who had the exhibition at Barbican.
Oh yeah, Raggi Kjartans. Yeah. Rassi Prump is his artist name, which just means ass and fart. That's absolutely serious. That's his artist name. He's a genius.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's a lot of it. I think there's like a very. I don't know. I think it's just sort of steeped in the culture of now. Like I think it started out in the sort of like the late '80s with like a punk scene, sort of. No, the early '80s, sort of a punk scene coming out of a couple of colleges in Reykjavik, and I think it just never really went away. I think I sometimes attribute like the amount of music or like interesting music that comes out of Iceland to boredom, because like we suck at outdoor sports for a very obvious reason, and you either just become incredibly good at games or music, and there's also because it doesn't feel like up until fairly recently, like the idea of making money out of music or like making that a career or even just like getting anything out of it was so distant and so ridiculous that I don't think anybody ever aspired to it, and therefore like all of the music is quite carefree and quite experimental and out there and weird, because it's just expression for the sake of expression rather than anything else. Like you can feel it with like a lot of music in the UK, or like the music that we go and see, when you go to like Shackle or Seabright or whatever, like the bands that are there, they have ambition, and they have like there is like an ultimate goal of becoming the next whatever.
Vaccines.
The vaccines, yeah. But yeah, we set out to be the next. What did we set out to be? I can't remember. We probably talked about it though.
Yeah.
We probably made like a list of bands that we wanted to, but I can't remember it. But anyway, yeah. So I think like what is fascinating about Icelandic music and a lot of the art scene in general is that like the scenes, because it's so small, that there's no sort of scene that really develops that is like exclusive. So like the metal scene just goes totally hand in hand with like a bunch of other things, you know, and people just sort of dabble in everything. And there's only so many musicians, so every single one of them is in like 5 bands. If you're in Iceland and you're good at like the trombone, you play every night, like with like, you know, if you're good at like any sort of instrument.
I mean, that kind of sounds like being in Wales, to be honest.
Yeah, I guess so, actually, yeah. Wales isn't that far off, yeah.
Yeah, and it's I guess is that actually, I just thought of an anecdotal fact for you when you were talking, and that is that when Iceland was originally discovered, they named it Iceland and they named Greenland Greenland because Iceland was a nice habitable one. Yeah. And so they just wanted everyone else to go to Greenland so they could have Iceland for themselves.
Fair enough.
Yeah, because Iceland's actually Greenland is actually the icy one.
Yeah, it's basically just a glacier. Yeah, but that unfortunately we could just call this like Árni dispels anecdotes, like factual anecdotes.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, this isn't true either. I don't actually know why this confusion is there, but I don't think it had anything to do with Greenland because Greenland wasn't found by then, you know. Or I don't think so anyway. Certainly not by the same people as found Iceland. Right. Because like, there was just there was Norwegians and like Scandinavians that just went to the next island to the west. It wasn't much later that they...
This is like Mythbusters.
This is Mythbusters, yeah. Icelandic anecdotal Mythbusters, yeah.
But I think in people's minds here, there's definitely a link between Iceland and Norway, Denmark, Sweden, Scandinavian countries. Yes. It just sort of seems like you guys echo each other's cultures.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah.
Like, we are basically, to a certain extent, Iceland is to Norway what Australia was to Britain. It's just like a prison colony, basically, or like, yeah. So really? it's like outlaws from Norway that were like sort of outlawed. Yeah, we're all outlawed and would be killed on sight that just left and went to Iceland. And so a lot of, they weren't really sent there, but there was a lot of people that just left. So a lot of the early settlers are just outlaws. Huh.
I didn't know that. That's really interesting. And I guess even nowadays, in terms of the way that we think about kind of like Scandinavian culture, is that it's liberal and it's invested in the arts, and it's kind of like kind of feels like a progressive society, I suppose. And that might not be true, but I feel like that is the view that a lot of Brits will have of Scandinavian culture, is that it's progressive culture.
I think that's true. I think in Iceland's case, I think due to the population, you can really like get people fired up about an idea, and it's pretty easy because there's only so many people that you need to convince. So the gay rights movement in Iceland, which is probably like it's probably one of the most gay-friendly places in the world. It's probably one of them. That sort of feels like it just started like in the sort of mid-90s maybe, and then just like 5 years later, like gay pride was almost a national holiday, and it's like attracted 120,000 people or whatever. So everything is really quick. Like if there is, and also because if you think about it, like the society is so small that you need to have all hands on deck, you know. So like any sort of excluding a social group based on like whatever it is, like gender or sexual orientation or whatever, is actually quite damaging for the society as such. So I think it is considerably, yeah, it is quite progressive in many ways. But equally, like I think we've shown and we've proven time and time again that like we're pretty like sort of staunchly against like immigrants, and like immigration laws in most of Scandinavia, certainly in Iceland, are pretty like draconian.
Is that so?
Yeah. Yeah.
So I couldn't go and live in... Yeah,
because you're in the EU. I don't know if you could in a couple of months, but...
I guess that's what makes this story so surprising to someone like me hearing it for the first time.
Yeah.
It's like, wait, it doesn't feel like it should have happened.
No, but to me, as somebody that like is from Iceland and understand, or like sort of thinks he understands it, like I actually find it. I find echoes of it still in society.
Right.
Like I think so. Like I don't.
Because I mean, a lot of the young women are still alive today.
I doubt that very much.
No, it's just that I saw a clip for a film about it and there were talking heads, but it was all in Icelandic. That's the other thing, is researching this is quite difficult because so much is in Icelandic, because it doesn't seem to be like a publicised story. So I think maybe it's best if you do explain to me what happened.
Okay, so the topic that this is a topic I've been like researching a lot recently, and something that I've always been aware of. This is basically it's something it's referred to in in Iceland as the situation, and it refers to basically the period where the British Army came into Iceland in 1941. But what was fascinating about it was you sort of need a little bit of backstory on this. Is that like, okay, so in 1890 or something, or like some sort of really late 19th century, there was a Danish photographer that came and took pictures of like farmers and like people in Iceland with like the most prized possession. And the vast majority of those pictures are with farmers with wheelbarrows. Like this is how behind we were, you know. This is at the same time as London has built an underground railway system, you know, and the Icelandic farmer is showing off his wheelbarrow. Yeah. And people were moving out of the last turf huts in the beginning of 20th century. So we're so far behind, and like the sort of industrial revolution just never happened, and there was none of that, and there was no real way of getting work. There was no culture in place really. I don't know this for a fact, but I think there was like one place in the whole of town in like the 30s that like had a license to sell alcohol. Like it was just like the country's very behind. So with the arrival of a bunch of like British soldiers that come with money and a lot of work, it just totally revolutionized the country.
But I mean, it wasn't just a bunch, was it? It was about 25,000.
It was basically the same population of British soldiers as there were of Icelanders. Yeah. Oh, well, not quite, but pretty much. Yeah. But I think like at the time, like I think there was just short of 40,000 people in Reykjavik, and at the height of the British settlement, or the British and the American settlement, it was very short. So
it was Britain first, and then American
sort of came over. And they held on to the army base until like the late 2000 something. I can't remember exactly when they left, but it was probably about the same time as I was moving here, so like 2007, 2006 or something. So it was like a strategically important place in the Cold War. But yeah, so they brought in so at the height, the amount of soldiers in there was like 50,000. So that's at the absolute height. I can't remember exactly when that was, but it's totally revolutionized it. So like all of a sudden there were cafes and dances and like rock music and there were things that just had never even just occurred to Icelandic.
And didn't a lot of people move in from outside Reykjavik?
Yeah, because all of a sudden there was lots of work to be had. Like you could there's lots of people that just worked simply with just like washing the soldiers' clothes and stuff like that. So all of a sudden there was disposable cash, there was disposable income, there was just things that had never been. And the situation as such is like quite an anecdotal and like almost always referred to in a quite a funny way. It refers to the reaction of mostly the male population of Iceland to the women's fascination with those beautiful little hunky soldiers, you know, and it's obvious. It's often referred to in like quite a sort of a humorous way, and you know that we don't have surnames, for example. So we've got like I'm the son of Árni, and like the anecdote goes that there's a bunch of people that are born around that time in the sort of the early 40s that just have like the names of like, because like Erlendur, for example, is like a name, but it also means foreign, or Herman, it just means soldier, but it's also a name. So like there's lots of children that were apparently born that was like just called Hermansson because it was just like an unknown soldier or whatever.
Right.
I don't know.
So the reason that you do that, the reason that you would have like Arnie's son, for example, as your surname is so that you don't end up dating your cousin, right? Because it's such a small population, is it not? So that you know where everyone's family is from, so you can avoid.
No, because if you know less by my name than you would by yours.
Okay, so that's another false anecdote that I was told about the Icelandic names.
No, it doesn't make any sense.
I was told it was to stop you, getting it on with a distant member of your family at the discotheque.
You're always going to get on with a distant member of the family. There's like, I don't know. I don't know if there is a way around that.
Right,
and that's a good point because the gene pool of Iceland was something that the men in 1941 wanted to protect. So there was a total, so it's like referred to now in like an anecdotal manner, but if you actually look at the facts and what happened, there's like some of the most like insane persecution of women by mostly self-described like morality police, basically.
Yeah.
And if you think about it, like as a woman in Reykjavik at the time, like you could either choose between like the stinking sailor that it's like he was like wearing a woolen jumper and probably had like rotten feet or whatever, or you could have this like really hunky British soldier that like knew how to dance and you know what I mean? Like it's just like obviously there was a lot of fascination with it, and I think the whole society was just totally turning over. But so anecdotal or not, or like funny or not, like it's actually like it's a total freak out, and like it was no more than maybe like 2 days after the arrival of the British Army that like the leaders of the biggest newspapers are just talking about like sluts walking around with like, and it's really like really dark, horrible language that is used to describe women. And then this ends up in such a frenzy that like the Prime Minister sets like a sort of a law against women of certain age socializing with British soldiers. It
was minors, wasn't it? It was anyone under 18.
Yeah, but they raised that to 20 in order
really?
to. Yeah, and they raised it to 20 for a brief period of time, and all women that were seen with a British soldier, or even just like suspected of socializing with British soldiers, could expect quite a lot of heat from almost anybody or anything, both just from the society and then eventually from the police.
Yeah.
And it was just written into law.
Well, there was one police inspector, wasn't there? A woman.
Yeah.
She was like the devil.
Yeah.
Essentially.
Yeah.
And I read a story that she would, if she suspected that a young girl had been fraternizing with a foreign soldier and she wanted to prove it, she would even take them to doctors to see if their hymen had been broken.
Yes.
And
that's actually what happened.
Yeah.
Yeah, but like that's so there was she was basically given the sort of job to sort of basically spy, like just like nationwide spying on women of any age. Like this was between like 16-year-old girls and up to 61-year-old. That was the oldest person that she got a file on. And like a lot of these people were like engaged. A lot of these people left the country with the soldiers. A lot of these people were pregnant, and also. Well, actually, we'll get to that. But so this wasn't just like some like the newspapers were referring to it as like the hookers with that don't get paid, basically. Like the Icelandic women were just referred to as this like immoral sort of spoilers of the beautiful gene pool, basically. It was insane. It was a total insane reaction. But she was quite a big player in this.
Do you remember her name?
Johanna, I want to say Johanna Knudsen.
Okay. Because there's a film where we can.
And this is how funny, this is how small Iceland is, because I knew of the film, right? Mm-hmm. And I've been reading up about this because so like the good thing about being from such a small country is that everything is so easily documented. So like you can just go on a website that's just called tímarit.is, and you can just punch in whatever topic you want, and it's digitized every single publication in Icelandic history. So you can just like go Ástandið or the situation, and you just get any news article that was written about it in 1941. It was fantastic.
Wow.
Yeah. So you can get all of this stuff. And
so you've read some of these articles firsthand?
Yeah. So they're just, I can just show them to you. They're like, obviously this is not for it. But yeah, just get them like this. The police officer was called Árni Árnason. You're talking about this film.
Yeah.
And I've got a funny anecdote for you.
Okay.
I was trying to get a hold of it, and I've been trying to get a hold of it for quite a while. It's not available anywhere online. I assume you just saw a clip out of it, right?
Yeah.
And basically the only way of of getting it is just to go to a library in Iceland. But obviously I'm not in Iceland, so I went onto a website that is called ja.is, which has every phone number and the address of every person in Iceland, and I just called the director. And I just called the director.
No.
Yeah. And this is apparently because I was asking around like people that I know that like might know the director, and if they could like hook me up with her or something. Her name is Alma Umarsdóttir. She's the director of that film. But but I didn't find anybody, and everybody just sort of suggested that I would just do that, and I was like, this is just so weird. But that's just how people in Iceland get what they need. They just pick up a phone and call people because there's a website that gives you their home address and telephone number.
Wow.
Yeah. So I called her, and she was like, let me figure this out. I'm not sure how it's easiest to do this. And she sort of like wavered a little bit and wasn't sure how she was going to get me a copy. So my dad just went to a library and ripped it for me.
And so the film is about the prison.
Yes, so that's how crazy it gets.
Right, okay.
So after Johanna has been given the sort of the basically license to spy on the sexual lives or the private lives of basically all women in Iceland, which is insane. Obviously, it wasn't as widespread as the men want to portray it. It wasn't like every woman in Iceland was dating a soldier.
Yeah.
But she certainly got the license to basically spy on anybody, and. She hands in a file and sort of with names and addresses in certain instances of about 500 women, and says that she suspects that they only got about 20% of it. So everything goes to frenzy. There's like a committee put on to sort of to sort of counteract this. There's a law passed. There's a special court put in place, and she is basically as she becomes like the head of police. She becomes the head of police in the end, or like certainly, I think she was the first female police officer in Iceland, and I think she ended up as the head of police. But anyway, she then, basically opens a prison. Yeah. So there were, I think, all in all, there were 14 women that were sent to that particular prison. And those were for crimes such as dancing with soldiers, or as you said, she would like grill them for hours on end about like suspected behavior, or suspected like, they had been suspected or seen with a soldier or whatever, and if the women denied, they would be sent to a doctor for like a checkup, and it's a pretty outrageous thing, but. And there was like there's even instances of like somebody who's like engaged and pregnant, engaged to a British soldier, or whether it was a British or American, I don't know, but engaged to a soldier and pregnant, and she was thrown into this basically like moral prison. Yeah.
And the prison itself was quite inhumane, and
from
what I've read, and they were kept in solitary confinement.
There was a solitary confinement booth which had no natural light in it.
Oh.
And they were thrown in like if for bad behavior, because obviously, like what was really remarkable about it is that like obviously a lot of these girls, mostly, which would probably be on the age of sort of like somewhere between sort of late teens and early 20s, they obviously weren't particularly happy about this. So if they misbehaved, they would be thrown into solitary confinement. And often on days on end. And like it's a pretty fucking dark period in Icelandic history, and it's all just because of hysteria.
Yeah.
And but like. But there's obviously other elements here that are like make it even darker, because if you like the word documented cases of like sexual abuse, both by Icelandic men prior to the arrival of the British Army, and then by soldiers. And there are suspected cases of basically women that had been raped, then grilled by the police, taken to a doctor to check if their hymen was okay, and then thrown into basically like a farm somewhere or something. Because not everybody was thrown into that prison. It was like there were other means, because that prison was only open for about 18 months.
Okay.
But you're basically so basically women being sentenced for having been raped by somebody. This is pretty fucking dark, right? Yeah, it's really, really horrible. And yeah.
And did you when you phoned this director, did you talk to her about it, and did she tell you things that you hadn't been able to find out from looking it up on the internet?
No, what there is.
She interviewed. The film is talking heads, right? The film is a lot of interviews with
mostly historians and
okay.
Mostly historians and people that like are sort of descendants of some of these women.
Right. Okay.
But I think like this would have been in 1941, and these are mostly people in their late teens, early 20s, and so I assume by now most of them are gone. They would be like really late in the 90s, basically now. But because they would have been born in like 1920 something.
Yeah.
But what's the reason she doesn't interview anybody that's a survivor of this?
Oh, okay.
And the reason is that there was the information, the documents, the spying, like the actual spy documents were declassified in 2012. But because they contain quite like pretty personal information, it's only really open to. It's not right. It's only really open to like researchers, and there's like a disclosure agreement that you have to sign that basically says that you cannot contact any of the women on the file, or you cannot talk to them at all. So Alma obviously has access to those documents, which is something that I wouldn't have.
Yeah.
So I didn't ask her anything about it specifically when I spoke to her. But her film is really is really sort of in detail.
And it's called The Girls of
Kleppjárnsreykir. Try that one.
Kleppjárnsreykir.
Yeah, that's cool. Kleppjárnsreykir. I'm actually thinking of like spending the rest of the evening just like subtitling.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. The reason I wanted to talk about this is because like I started getting really into this when I was telling a film director friend of mine, Karan Kandari, an Indian film director friend of mine. It doesn't matter where he's from, but and I was telling him about this sort of the anecdotes that I started out telling you, which is sort of quite funny, and he got obsessed with the idea of like sort of basically. Yeah, he wanted just any information he could possibly find in English, and I started looking at it for him, and there was none. But in the sort of as I was looking for information in English, I just found lots of very detailed information in Icelandic that has been sort of mostly hushed. Like it's just how bad it was. You know, people don't really talk about that.
Yeah,
it's just sort of talked about in a humorous way. Yeah, the situation. You know, like it's like, but. Yeah, that's how I got really into the topic anyway.
The minimal amounts that I could find to read up on it, it was saying that even after, this was all absolved, the prison was absolved, and a lot of the soldiers went back home at the end of the Second World War, but the shame, there was some of the women still, like they carried the shame of it to their grave. Yeah. So until, 10, 20 years ago, they were still feeling the effects of the situation.
Yeah. And there's lots of women that committed suicide. There's lots of there's really like quite a lot of dark stories there. Definitely there was. It's been a part of like Icelandic culture ever since to sort of like find this a humorous period of time, despite the fact that it's one of the darkest in our history. But yeah, definitely. Like, despite the fact that like the law then got overturned by the next prime minister, and the prison got closed down, and people were persecuted in the same manner, but like not like governmental state sort of sponsored persecution of all Icelandic women stopped. And like, there was still, there's still in the culture, yeah. Like the men were still very, there were all sorts of ideas about how to mark women that had been British soldiers. So like ideas about like shaving their heads and.
Yeah, what I read that was even after this was after the end of the Second World War.
It would have been around the same time.
Right. Okay.
I think like the time that we refer to as the situation, I thought it was something that like basically lasted a lot longer. But I think the hysteria sort of is around 1941 and up until like the election of a new government, which happens like now 44 or 43. Actually, we got independence in 44, so it must have been around then. I'm not really sure.
So it sounds like fucking Game of Thrones.
It sounds pretty crazy.
Shaving your head and making you walk down the street while shouting shame.
Yeah. Because you slept with, or you danced with a British soldier. Like, yeah. But that I don't think that actually ever happened. But those were ideas.
Okay.
But girls were kicked out of college.
Really?
Yeah, for like having been seen with British soldiers. But they obviously like these are like men that like on a day off have like a ball, and they would have like cars come and pick up the girls, and the girls would come in for free and stuff like that. They wanted the company of the, and so did the girls, obviously. So like the sort of the hysteria in the sort of Icelandic sort of male population was, it's it is sort of in hindsight quite a humorous reaction that just went totally overboard.
I suppose it's so far removed from comprehension now that the only way that you can really look at it is by trying to find the humour.
Yeah,
because
I think so, right?
It's so dark and it's almost incomprehensible. So it kind of in turn becomes this funny thing that happened.
This funny thing that happened.
It's really not.
No, it's really not.
No.
It's really, really not that funny. But again, like the Icelandic sort of just the population of Iceland thinks of this in a relatively humorous way. I think what you read did you just read like an article and Google Translate it?
No, I read a Wikipedia page.
Okay.
And then I read an article about the film.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Yeah, and I think there was like one other thing that I maybe did Google Translate.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Because I thought you sounded like you were reading a really in-depth article, which is by this journalist called Maria, which is like that's pretty like scathing, and it's like when it was sort of, I think it was written around the same time as the film came out, but like the sort of the shame and the sort of level of guilt that like the level of guilt is only really sort of surfacing now, I think, in the wake of like a lot of these papers being declassified. Right, yeah.
And journalists being able to go research it
precisely.
And make films and such.
Yeah, but there still today, there has not been a single public apology by the government nor the police nor anyone. Still today. Yes. And I think it's about high time.
Yeah. Why do you think that is? Do you think it's not just because there hasn't been any sort of awareness of it from outside? So it's, to people in Iceland, it's this humorous anecdote, whereas if there were to be more knowledge of it outside the borders, then perhaps there would be more people talking about it and seeing it from a different light. Or do you think it's with generational, where people of your generation now from Iceland are starting to see it for what it was?
I think all of that like applies. I think you're probably right. I think like outside knowledge of this dark period of a story would certainly sort of push the government to make some sort of a public statement on it. But I think you're also right that like I think the depth and sort of the horror of the situation is only really sort of becoming apparent much later to like the broader public anyway. And I think that's a lot to do with that film that she just did. I'm almost at it. Like, it was a very popular documentary. I just wasn't living in Iceland, so I didn't see it.
Right, of course. And it's strange that it hasn't exported.
Yeah, I think I might subtitle it and send her.
Netflix. Subtitle it and send it to Netflix. I'd watch that. Yeah. But I was thinking of like subtitling it and sending it back to the director just to sort of say, "Sorry, I hacked your film." Yeah. Sorry, I hacked your film, but I've created this a new film, which you can now share with
whatever.
Yeah. Do it.
I think it would be really. I think it's a really interesting and an important thing to like talk about and acknowledge. You know?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, when you first told me about it, I couldn't comprehend it because my sort of preconceptions of Icelandic culture has always been that it's progressive and liberal and artsy and just like also nice.
Yeah, so elfish and so like kind and
it's like blonde angels.
Yeah. Exactly. And then we just imprisoned our women for hanging out with the wrong gene pool or whatever. I don't know. Like, it's pretty nuts.
A big thank you to Árni for sitting down and talking me through that absolutely incredible story, and a big thank you for the cup of coffee too. You're listening to Talk the Line. You can check us out on Twitter at BestFitMusic. Check out the website, thelineofbestfit.com. I'm at Jen Long on Twitter if you want to give me a cheeky follow. And don't forget to subscribe to Talk the Line if you want it delivered to your podcast thing every week or so. See you then.